It was just me and my son that Christmas Eve. A quiet night at home, surrounded by twinkling lights and the comforting hum of holiday music. I told myself this year would be simple, peaceful. But peace was the last thing I got. As a single mom, I had gotten used to making holidays special on my own. It wasn't always easy, but the look on my son Jamie's face when we put up the Christmas tree made every struggle worth it. He was only 6, full of that wide-eyed wonder that made Christmas magical. That night, snow began falling steadily, blanketing the world in silence. Jamie was glued to the window, watching the flakes drift down. He said it was like a snow globe, his nose pressed to the glass. I smiled, sitting down on the couch with a cup of cocoa. I told him it was, and that Santa wouldn't come if he didn't go to bed soon. He laughed and shook his head, insisting Santa was coming soon. We were halfway through watching A Charlie Brown Christmas when Jamie suddenly jumped up, pointing excitedly at the window. He shouted that Santa was there. My heart warmed at his excitement, and I played along, asking if he was sure. But when I turned to look, my smile froze. There was someone standing outside. At first, it was hard to tell, just a faint outline against the snowy backdrop. Tall, motionless. The figure was shrouded in shadow, but I could tell it wasn't Santa. I told Jamie carefully to come sit with me, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. He protested, saying he wanted to see Santa. I repeated myself, firmer this time, and told him to come now. Something in my tone must have gotten through to him because he finally came to sit by me. I kept my eyes on the window, but by the time I looked again, the figure was gone. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a neighbor walking their dog or a shadow cast by the streetlights. I told myself I was overthinking, but my unease lingered. After Jamie went to bed, I double-checked every lock in the house. Front door, back door, windows, all secure. I even pulled the curtains shut, blocking out the sight of the snow-covered yard. I tried to settle down with a book, but every little creak and groan of the old house set my nerves on edge. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows, and I told myself that was all it was, just the wind. At around midnight, I decided to call it a night. I peeked into Jamie's room before heading to bed. He was sound asleep, clutching his stuffed reindeer, the glow of the nightlight casting soft shadows on the walls. But when I turned to leave, something caught my eye. There were wet, muddy footprints on the carpet. They started at the window and led directly to Jamie's bed. My stomach dropped. The window was locked, wasn't it? I rushed over to check. It was latched, just as I had left it. But the glass was fogged with condensation. And there, pressed faintly against it, was the outline of a hand. My breath hitched. I stared at the print, my mind racing. Someone had been outside the window, standing there watching my son. I grabbed my phone, heart pounding as I dialed 911. The operator assured me someone would be there soon, but every second felt like an eternity. I didn't move from Jamie's bedside until I heard the knock at the door. The police searched the yard, but the snow had already covered any tracks. They checked the windows and doors, assuring me there was no sign of forced entry. One officer said it was probably just a prank, though his tone lacked conviction. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in Jamie's room, watching over him until morning. Christmas morning should have been filled with joy and excitement, but all I felt was dread. I couldn't stop thinking about the figure outside, the footprints, the handprint on the glass. Whoever or whatever it was, they didn't take anything. They didn't try to come inside again. But the thought that someone had been there watching us was enough to chill me to the bone. I never told Jamie what happened that night. I didn't want to scare him, but I still wonder if he saw something I didn't when he pointed at that window and said Santa was there. The kids were still buzzing with excitement long after the party ended, and for a while, it felt like we'd pulled off the perfect Christmas celebration. But looking back now, I can't shake the feeling that something was off, something I should have noticed in the moment but didn't. Every year, my family goes all out for Christmas. Lights on the roof, stockings over the fireplace, a massive tree in the living room. My wife Sarah insists that Christmas should feel magical, especially for our kids, Maddie and Ethan. This year, Sarah had the idea to hire a Santa for our Christmas party. She said the kids would love it, imagining the joy on their faces as she talked about the plan. I wasn't sure we needed it, but I went along with it. A week before the party, Sarah said she'd found someone through a local ad, a retired actor named Santa Jim, who played Santa for small gatherings. She mentioned that he'd show up for a modest fee, assuring me the kids would never forget it. The party was exactly what we'd hoped for. Friends, family, laughter, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the house. Around 7 p.m., the doorbell rang, and there he was, Santa Jim. He was perfect, tall, with a full white beard and a belly that jiggled just enough to make you believe he really was Santa. His red suit was pristine, and he carried a sack over his shoulder like something straight out of a movie. The kids adored him. Maddie ran up to hug him, while Ethan could barely contain his excitement as Santa handed out candy canes and posed for photos by the tree. He stayed for about an hour, cracking jokes, listening to the kids' wish lists, and singing a few carols with the group. Before leaving, he made sure to take a big group photo with everyone. Sarah thanked him as she walked him to the door, saying he had made the night special. He nodded and gave her a warm smile before slipping out into the snowy night. The party wound down after that, and by midnight, the house was quiet again. Maddie and Ethan went to bed dreaming of Christmas morning, and Sarah and I cleaned up before crashing on the couch, exhausted but happy. The next morning, as the kids tore into their presents, I scrolled through the photos from the party on my phone, ready to relive the memories. But when I got to the photos of Santa, I stopped cold. Something was wrong with his face. In every picture, his features looked warped. At first, it was subtle, a slight blur, a faint distortion. But as I scrolled, it got worse. His eyes seemed darker, almost hollow. His smile stretched unnaturally wide, giving him a grotesque, predatory look. I called Sarah over, my voice shaking. She frowned when she saw the photos, whispering as she asked what was wrong with his face. I said I didn't know, and she wondered aloud if it could be a glitch. She froze suddenly, asking where the confirmation email for the booking was. I asked her what she meant, and she explained she'd sent a request through the ad but never got a reply. She thought he just showed up because he'd accepted. A chill ran down my spine as I asked her, "So, we didn't actually hire him?" Sarah shook her head slowly. We spent the rest of the morning trying to figure out who he was, calling our friends, asking if someone had arranged for him as a surprise. No one had. Then we tried tracking down the ad Sarah had seen. It wasn't there anymore. No record of Santa Jim anywhere online. We even checked the security footage from the night before. The camera by the front door had captured him arriving, but the footage didn't show where he'd come from. 1 second the driveway was empty, and the next he was just there, standing at the door. The footage also didn't show him leaving. That night, as we lay in bed, neither of us could sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. The way it looked in the photos, stretched and wrong. We never figured out who or what Santa Jim was. But to this day, I can't help but wonder what he wanted and why he chose our family. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear his voice, faint and distant, laughing like he did that night. If you're drawn to tales like these, consider subscribing to Spectral for more chilling entries waiting to be uncovered. And if you have your own haunting story that you'd like featured in an upcoming compilation, we'd love to hear it. Just email us at spectralentries@gmail.com. Now, let's get back to the video. I've always loved the quiet of Christmas Eve in the countryside. No cars, no distant hum of city life, just the sound of snow falling and the crackling of the fire. This year, though, I learned that silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes, it hides things you'd rather not know were there. I live alone in a small cabin deep in the woods. It's cozy, remote, and exactly the kind of place I always imagined spending Christmas. This year, I decided to skip the family gatherings and enjoy the holiday on my own. A little self-care, I told myself. The evening started out perfectly. I had the fire going, a mug of hot cocoa in my hands, and my favorite Christmas movie playing in the background. Outside, the snow was falling steadily, blanketing everything in a soft, eerie quiet. Around 10 p.m., just as I was getting ready to turn in, I heard it, a faint tapping sound coming from above. I froze, my eyes darting toward the ceiling. It wasn't loud, but it was steady, like someone lightly drumming their fingers on the roof. I tried to brush it off. Probably just a branch swaying in the wind, I told myself. After all, the snowstorm had picked up, and the trees surrounding the cabin were tall enough to brush against the roof. Still, the sound unnerved me. I turned off the TV, locked all the doors, and double-checked the windows before heading to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept hearing it, and every time I started to drift off, it seemed to get louder, more deliberate. Then came the thuds. Heavy, deliberate thuds, like someone was walking across the roof. My heart raced as I lay there, staring up at the ceiling. This can't be happening, I thought. Gathering my courage, I grabbed the flashlight I kept by the bed and crept out into the hallway. I listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the sound. It wasn't coming from outside, it was coming from the attic. The hatch to the attic was in the hallway ceiling, just a few steps from my bedroom. Standing beneath it, I could hear faint shuffling sounds, like someone or something moving around up there. I wanted to run, to lock myself in the bathroom and wait for morning, but I knew I wouldn't feel safe until I knew what was going on. Gripping the flashlight tightly, I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up, one shaky step at a time. The attic was freezing, my breath fogging up as I shined the flashlight around. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the usual collection of old boxes and forgotten junk. But then I saw them. Muddy footprints. They trailed across the wooden floorboards, leading to a dark corner of the attic where a bundle of pine needles lay scattered. I moved closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. That's when I saw the boots. They were old, worn, and caked with mud, sitting neatly next to the bundle of pine needles like someone had taken them off before lying down. And that's exactly what it looked like someone had been lying there, watching me from above while I slept. I scrambled back down the ladder, slammed the attic hatch shut, and bolted every door and window in the cabin. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, when the sun finally rose, I went outside to look for tracks in the snow. There weren't any. Not on the roof, not by the attic window, not anywhere. But I know what I saw. I left the cabin that day and haven't been back since.